So hi everybody and welcome back. This is a kit review of a quite old model, made by Gunze. Gunze was is a company making mostly accessories for modeling, and back in time they also decided to produce some kits that originally were nearly never their own production kit. As far as I know, I always crossed kits produced by other companies, usually from Nitto, from Eishi, Asegawa, depending what type of kit you are searching for. And this is the review of this model, quite interesting Porsche. It was the 935. Here they call it just 935 Turbo. In reality, it was the 935/78 Turbo kit. It was what they nicknamed back in time the whale Porsche. It was one of the last evolution of the 935, going to the silhouette categories, and it was proposed by Porsche in the Le Mans 24 Hours of 1978. It was quite performing car, incredibly fast, and it was one of the hugest modification, arriving from the late 70s and arriving to his natural trials to evolve the idea of the 1935 in the beginning of the 80s, where the project was already kind of out of date. Instead Porsche, the official Porsches like this car was, then they switched to the 936 model that already became like a prototype car, and then arriving to the mighty 956 and 962 that dominated the 80s, during all the endurance categories. The model proposed by Gunze. There is another alternative, on the market that is the same identical subject made by Tamiya. In my opinion, the Tamiya is always nicer, like kit, but the limit of also such Tamiya kits is that they are really outdated kits. So do not expect something that is in the detail area of the modern Tamiya kits, and this is also no exception. So there is not this big issues difference between the Gunze Sangyo kit and the Tamiya kit. I don't think that inside it is the same identical kit. I made a mistake some years ago to sell the original Tamiya kit that was pretty decent, also because it was already the reissue of the Tamiya kit with brand new cartograph martini spot over the body, and you can find it anywhere online and so on, but it's always constantly kind of pricey model, even more because it's an historical Porsche, so you will pay kind of big money for that stuff. This is stuff that is worth, in my opinion, not more than 20-30 euros, not more. So if you start to pay 60, 70, 80 bucks for it, is a little bit too much for me. And what we can see here, it is that the model I took here was a model coming from a private collection, so it is not considered like a real brand new model, but this is a kind of used stuff, and this, of course, I didn't note that at the time. I was kind of scammed of this, it always happens when you go for searching for used model, that you have bad surprises in it, and usually that is related to the main wheels that usually are or missing or destroyed. Sometimes believing in the good faith of the seller, they can be completely destroyed because of the poor quality of the rubber. I always think that, excluding just the Tamiya item, all the other company making rubber tires, they have a problem. They had problem in the past because the resin is a kind of resin, that they used to have a soft vinyl tire, was constantly having problem, and having even more back in the days. They used to do that, the Dunlop logo over the wheel because it looked like perfect, but in reality is absolutely not possible to use it, because in reality it was something that was engraved on the wheel. This is something that is probably deep 1 millimeter in reality, so this is absolutely off scale and you have to send it off and clean it. But just for the 935 model, they were a little bit different from the other Porsche car. And 935, they were quite bigger, because they were already going into the prototype dimensions, featuring very big wheels and big rims, and this model is no exception. If you look at as you can see, the blister here are open, but the main part of the frame, of the inner frame, is still intact. It's just a slightly consideration. They had to do the shape of the 935/78. They had the problem that the silhouette of the car had to become much more narrower, for the increased speed. This was a car able to raising up to 350 km/h, if not even more, in test qualifying made at Le Mans. There is the record online if you search for it. And what they had to change was basically the main part of the 911, that was this, in Italian they call it padiglione. It is the main part of the cockpit, so probably the A B and C pillar frame were in a slightly different angle compared to the real original 911. You know, if you take the real 911, as you can see, is slightly narrower, even more in the back, you know, because the back had always the problem to create a kind of, this started from this is my racing kit of the 1973 RSR R7, you know, and they already started in the 73 to study something like this, made in fiberglass, to try to create and increase the downforcing on the rear axle of the car, where there is the engine and all the proportion of the car is on this side. So they always had the problem with the 911 to try to keep it the ass on the road, because very often it was very easy that it flip away, you know. It was extremely hard to drive the 911 in racing, you know. And they did something like this because, you know, increasing the powering and everything became much more bigger. Of course, the wheel became much wider, so you cannot go any longer for a kind of round configuration like they did for the previous 935. You know, remember that the 76 model was completely rounded here, kind of evolution of the RSR. You know, it was, everything was the evolving that Porsche made in the 70s to arrive to achieve something that was extremely performing in the endurance racing, you know. So they went on this squared shape that was typical of the 70s, you know, and the final rear end completely made in fiberglass. This was still not the era of the carbon fiber, so this was completely wood, aluminum and fiberglass. And of course all the rear part became completely different. This was a concept that they took it back when they started to develop the K4 model, evolving a prototype car coming from the Kramer evolution of the K3. You know, it was the Kramer brother were the guys that were starting to compete to the official factory Porsches, you know. So they always try to use a secondary solution that was not evolved directly from the Porsche factory, so they had to make their own version. And the K4 anyway had the biggest lack compared to this 3 years previous car, because it was completely unreliable. So instead this one was absolutely much more performing. You know, I've been working in racing, in the construction of racing cars, you know, in Italy in the beginning of 2006, I think it was, yes. And it was a company making prototypes and preparation based on Honda cars. And what I seen, it was when you don't have the completely knowledge improvement from the company making part and modifying their parts, you go in a kind of foggy world where every little detail that you try to improve, it's usually results like a kind of down-proving the car. So the car results into being much more slower and much more unreliable. And this was exactly the same condition and situation. Coming back to the model, what we can see, it was really that the shape became incredibly narrower, and it's very 70s, you know, like model. But the model provided by Gunze as well as the model provided by Tamiya, so it is not that case where you can say, okay, if I buy a Tamiya kit is badly better than this. Absolutely not. Also because the same condition that you have here, as you can see here, it was still the battery pack, you know. This was still made for the battery of the 70s, where you basically adjust the AA battery, you know, 4-pack. Imagine the weight that this stuff can have. And I always wonder what happened when this stuff crashes. You know, they provide a kind of a roll bar in the front of it, but made in plastic. You know, this is something that is absolutely a nonsense in today modeling. Take a look at what it have to look at the hand, and what do you have to modify to make it in a proper way, you know. Something like this. As you can see, that is the rear hole for the propulsion made by the little motor. I think there is also inside the little motor that, honestly, back in the days, this part of the 70s stuff, they were quite good in quality. The electrical motor, you know, they were all made by quite good company in Japan. Let me see if they have it. Here I cannot see it, you know, this is sealed, this is the transmission going on. The big pinion and the big plastic wheel, you know, this is something that ridiculous. But you know, back in the days this was something that kids used to go mad for it. And let me see, because this I still didn't check if there is the engine inside. There is not. No problem, you know, I don't need it, but it was just curiosity, also because many of them, mostly in Tamiya stuff, I have somewhere here in my mess, you know, because I never trash it there, because they are perfect to repair parts or do something like that, to make micro tools by your own with the micro welding, you know, so you can do some funny stuff. There is not so much that you can use in the model, you know, despite of the shape. And I think, do I have it, the main wing? Yes, I have it there, but it's absolutely badly molded, you know. Always consider that this is a model of the early 80s, so do not expect so much. As well as for the wheels, they covered what in reality was BBS wheels with the typical net under here, so the mesh typical from BBS was absolutely stunning, and in all those models they completely placed it over and molded over the vents, so there is not so much use for this type of wheels, you know. And it had just to be done like it is. There is a lot of alternatives anyway. If you search for 3D producer, they made a lot of extra detail, you know. They became a little bit pricey, you know, because if you start to search for the tires, you know, I need to buy some tires for an upcoming project that I have over the K3 model, with the idea to use and to finally assemble the Scale Coachworks racing kit that I had without rubber tires. And so I will not use this one because this anyway don't have a good quality in my opinion. It's just part of this vintage kit, and I will keep it like it is. As well as you can see from there to open there is no need to open the plastic, you know. I think you understand it anyway what I mean. If you look also the interior hub and the cockpit is absolutely ridiculous, you know. There is a sort of crispy type of plastic reproducing what I really don't know. It should be like kind of the dashboard of the 70s car, you know. If they take a Golf from the 70s or a Beatles from the 70s, you have the same type of plastic, you know. And it's absolutely unrealistic and not copying absolutely anything at all. The same for the roll case. So the model is basically garbage, I dare to say. But as we say, there is not so much. This is the rear, you see the rear end, and they made it in that way what in reality was the kind of rear bumper coming from the RSR models of 1976 improved, you know. So it's completely wrong in shape, dimension, proportion and everything, and it was absolutely not this way. There is plenty of documentation to make a good model of the mighty whale, the real whale, you know. And also for this reason, you know, because you anyway have a couple of models running around, the Gunze Sangyo and the Tamiya model of the 935/78, you probably don't will not find anybody making a decent modern kit about this car, because it's really a subject that have been famous for many reasons, you know. And despite there was the private owned racing Momo car racing mostly in America in the IMSA category, there was not so many different liveries for this one. I think the Davidoff, you know, even the American 935/78 was racing with that blue and white colors, you know. But despite these 3-4 liveries, you don't have so many about the car. So I don't think that in the future there will be somebody making a nicer and much more up-to-date modern status model of this type of racer. So there is neither a needing. Look I die. Look the part of the steering column that they place it inside, big plastic pin. This is really a jump in the past, you know. So just consider it like it is. So it's basically nothing more and nothing less than a slot car. You basically have the body, the transparent hub molded in a single piece to be easier to fit, battery pack inside, and 4 ugly rims, and that's it. So that is my idea. If you cross this type of model, guys, it's not so different. The Tamiya model is not so different. They just made a reissue where basically the interior hub was a little bit different, so they changed one mold inside that model to make it a little more acceptable, because anyway, despite everything, you know, this was typical of the 70s. The final overall look of the body was not so wrong. Many say that it was under scale, some say that it was in 1/28. I think absolutely not. If you look, compare it to, take the dimension of the windshield, you know, this look bigger, but because the cornice around is completely thinner, you know. This is based on a Tamiya model. Instead, this is their one, but if you see closely the cornice of it, the cornice is double than this one. So probably this is the one giving the fake feeling of having a smaller front windshield, and what gives the impression to be completely underscaled. And I don't think it is underscaled. Once again, it was identical situation in the Tamiya model. Also, we have a wiper here, you know, typical. Jesus. Typical of the 70s, if you see the wiper completely molded over, and that's it, you know. You have to take it like for what it is and do not expect so much. It's a vintage kit, come back in the 70s with all the positive and the many negatives of the 70s, because it is much more easy to say, it was so nice in the 70s. I was a kid there, I was there, and believe me, and not so many regrets about that here, so I don't miss them so much. That's it, guys. Anyway, the subject, forget to say, but of course it's no needing. Of course, when I take it, I was kind of scammed because I don't have the proper decal sheet inside. There is a bad copy made using the Tamiya decal sheet coming from the 935/76, so there is no use for it, and I have no use neither for this. Anyway, if you want to change the decal for this model, always take a look. This is no commercial, no promo. I have no deal with Michael Portaro, even if it is a Facebook friend. I don't have any deal with him about this, but anyway, I say that because he's a good guy, Italian origin, so I like the guy. And have a look at his website at indicals.net. Indicals provide a lot of extra decals. I used a couple of them, and they look good in quality to me. So for me, it's the best choice ever to try to do something like that. Otherwise, you have to go and search for your own design or other crappy manufacturer of decal. There is plenty around, and the quality is absolutely garbage compared to Indicals. So go for it. It's an American company. It posts worldwide, and the quality is great. Also because, final note, then I promise to shut up, the red dots over this Martini livery, they were not like the ordinary Martini red, but they were purple red, so they were completely much more brighter than this color, this looking at the actual car like they did in the US. That's it, guys. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.